Jack Harrison's life was quiet and uneventful, just the way he liked it. Every morning, he donned the uniform of Swift Track Deliveries and climbed into his well-worn van. He was known around town as the clumsy delivery guy who couldn't walk 10 feet without tripping over his own feet. It was an image he carefully cultivated, far removed from his former life as a Navy SEAL, where precision and control had been everything. To the townspeople, Jack was a mystery wrapped in a laughable package. His lanky frame and perpetually messy brown hair made him appear unassuming. Kids would giggle as they watched him drop packages or stumble on a curb, and adults would shake their heads with a smile, wondering how he managed to keep his job. Yet no one could deny his dedication. Jack always delivered, no matter the weather or the mishaps along the way. Jack found solace in the predictability of his routine. He'd wake at sunrise, brew a strong cup of coffee, and map out his deliveries for the day. The town's quiet streets, lined with mom-and-pop shops and friendly neighbors, were a far cry from the chaotic battlefields he once knew. Here, he felt safe, invisible. But beneath the surface, Jack's past lingered like a shadow. He often woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, memories of Afghanistan flashing before his eyes, the sound of gunfire, the shouts of his team, and the deafening silence that followed. It was all still there. To cope, Jack threw himself into his deliveries, finding peace in the simple act of bringing people their packages. One of Jack's regular stops was Mia's Café, a cozy spot on Main Street. Mia, the owner, had a sharp wit and a warm smile that made her popular with everyone in town. She always had Jack's favorite, a blueberry muffin and a black coffee, ready when he arrived. "You're too hard on yourself, Jack," she'd say whenever he apologized for spilling sugar or knocking over a chair. Everyone trips now and then. Jack appreciated her kindness, but never let it sink in too deep. He had lost too much to let anyone get close. His world was small by design, a shield against the chaos he feared might return. Little did Jack know that chaos was closer than he thought. One rainy afternoon, Jack was delivering a package to an address near the docks. The area was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that prickled at the edges of his nerves. The wet ground glistened under dim streetlights as he parked his van and grabbed the parcel, which was unusually heavy. A gust of wind whipped his jacket, and Jack instinctively scanned his surroundings, a habit he could never quite break. As Jack walked toward the warehouse, muffled voices and the clinking of metal caught his attention. Pausing, he shifted his gaze to a nearby truck being unloaded by a group of men. Their movements were hurried and precise, each crate handled with the care of someone dealing in precious cargo. Jack's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a label on one of the crates. Military-grade weapons. His gut tightened. "This isn't right," Jack muttered under his breath. He crouched slightly, using his van as cover to observe. The men were clearly on edge, glancing around as if expecting trouble. One of them, a burly man with a shaved head and tattoos snaking up his arms, barked orders, his voice carrying through the rain. Jack knew he should walk away. This wasn't his problem, but his instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive in combat, told him something was wrong. He lingered too long. "Hey, who's there?" The shout shattered the relative quiet. Jack froze as the tattooed man's piercing gaze locked onto him. Two others turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to suspicion. Jack straightened, holding up the parcel. "Just a delivery," he said, keeping his voice calm but friendly. He took a step back toward his van, but it was too late. "What'd you see?" the tattooed man growled, striding toward him. Behind him, the others followed, their hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Before Jack could answer, a taller figure emerged from the shadows of the warehouse, Victor Kane. Dressed in a tailored coat and exuding an air of cold authority, Kane's presence silenced the group. His eyes, sharp and calculating, sized up Jack in an instant. "You saw too much," Kane said, his voice low but threatening. He nodded toward his men. "Make sure he remembers to mind his own business." Jack barely had time to react before rough hands grabbed him, dragging him toward the warehouse. They threw him to the wet ground, his parcel spilling open beside him. Jack gritted his teeth as the tattooed man landed a heavy kick to his side. Pain flared, but Jack remained silent. Reacting now would only reveal what he was capable of. Victor crouched beside him, his cold gaze locking onto Jack's. "This isn't your fight, delivery boy. Stay out of it, or next time, It won't just be your van we wreck." With that, Kane stood and walked away. The others followed, one of them smashing Jack's van window with a crowbar for good measure. Rain mixed with the blood on Jack's face as he lay there, motionless until they were gone. Slowly, Jack pulled himself to his feet, wincing at the pain in his ribs. His van was trashed and his pride was bruised. But what burned brightest was the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He looked toward the warehouse one last time, then climbed into his wrecked van and drove off into the rain. He'd been wronged before, but this time they'd crossed a line. Back at his small apartment, Jack assessed the damage. His van was totaled, and his pride was bruised. He sat at his kitchen table, a bag of frozen peas pressed to his throbbing ribs, and stared at the darkened window. The rain continued to fall outside, each drop a reminder of the chaos he had just faced. But what angered him most wasn't the van or his injuries. It was the danger Victor Kane and his gang posed to the town. Jack couldn't shake the image of those crates filled with military-grade weapons. He'd seen firsthand the destruction such firepower could cause in the wrong hands. "They're not just some local thugs," Jack muttered to himself. "They're bringing a war to this town, and no one even knows it." He wanted to stay out of it. He'd built this quiet life to escape the violence, to leave the battlefield behind. But the thought of innocent people getting caught in the crossfire made his hands clench into fists. Jack had spent years fighting to protect others. Could he really turn a blind eye now? His gaze shifted to the corner of the room, where an old metal trunk sat, half hidden beneath a pile of blankets. It had been years since he'd opened it, years since he'd thought about the tools and memories it contained. Slowly, Jack stood and walked toward it, his ribs protesting with every step. He knelt and brushed the dust off the lid, his fingers hesitating on the latch. Inside were the remnants of a life he'd tried to leave behind: a tactical knife, a small field radio, a weathered notebook filled with mission plans. On top was a photograph of his old SEAL team, their faces young and full of determination. Jack's jaw tightened as he picked it up. "They think I'm just some bumbling delivery guy," he said, his voice low and steady. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." Jack set the photograph aside and pulled out the knife. The weight of it in his hand was familiar, grounding. His decision was made. The gang had crossed a line, and Jack knew he couldn't sit by while they endangered the town he'd come to call home. "I left the fight behind," Jack said quietly, gripping the knife, "but it seems the fight has found me again." He stood, determination hardening his features. It was time to remind himself and anyone who crossed him what he was truly capable of. Jack's transformation began that night. The old trunk became his lifeline again, its contents a bridge between his past and the challenge ahead. He carefully laid out each item on the floor of his apartment, assessing its condition. The tactical knife was still razor sharp. The field radio crackled to life after some quick maintenance. A weathered map of the town soon bore new marks, as Jack noted the gang's movements and possible choke points. This wasn't just preparation, it was precision. He used an old pair of binoculars to observe the gang's hideouts from a distance, blending into the background of the town. Each night, he tracked their patterns, when they moved shipments, when guards patrolled, and where they kept their vehicles. During the day, Jack's deliveries served as cover for reconnaissance. His clumsy persona let him overhear gossip from local shopkeepers and bartenders without suspicion. Bit by bit, he pieced together the gang's operation. At night, Jack trained with a discipline honed through years of service. His apartment became a makeshift gym. Push-ups, pull-ups, and shadowboxing filled the space. He pushed through the pain in his ribs, every wince fueling his determination. When he wasn't training his body, he sharpened his mind, sketching plans and backup strategies on scraps of paper. One evening, Jack found himself standing in front of a cracked mirror, sweat glistening on his brow. For the first time in years, he saw not the clumsy delivery man, but the warrior he had once been. His shoulders squared, his eyes steady. The hesitation was gone. "They're going to regret ever crossing me," he said quietly, slipping the knife into a sheath at his belt. Jack wasn't just preparing for a fight, he was preparing to finish it. The gang's activity escalated. One night, they stormed into the local cafe owned by Jack's close friend, Mia, demanding protection money. Mia, always brave, stood her ground, refusing to hand over a single dollar. She told them exactly where they could take their threats. Her defiance only made them angrier. They returned the next night. This time they didn't ask. Tables were overturned, shelves smashed, and the air filled with the sound of breaking glass. Mia's cafe, once warm and inviting, was left in ruins. The gang made their message clear as they left. Next time, it'll be worse. When Mia told Jack what had happened, her voice was shaky but resolute. "I'm not letting them win," she said, her eyes blazing with defiance. "But I don't know what to do." Jack listened in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. He looked around the cafe, at the broken furniture and shattered windows. This wasn't just a random act of violence, it was personal. "They've made this personal," Jack said, his voice low and steely, his fists clenched at his sides as he surveyed the destruction. The anger simmering inside him threatened to boil over, but he forced himself to stay calm. "They're going to regret that." That night, Jack added new marks to his map: the cafe, the nearby streets, and the most likely routes the gang had used to escape. He stayed up late, sharpening his tactics and preparing for the next phase of his plan. Mia, unaware of Jack's true capabilities, watched him work with quiet curiosity. "What are you doing?" she asked as he studied his notes. "Making sure they don't hurt anyone else," Jack replied, his voice firm but distant. The gang's attack on Mia's cafe was a turning point. Jack wasn't just fighting for the town anymore. He was fighting for his friends, and he wasn't going to stop until the threat was gone for good. Jack set his plan into motion. It began on a moonless night, the darkness providing the perfect cover for his infiltration of the gang's main warehouse. Over the past weeks, he had memorized every detail of the building's layout, the guards' rotations, the entry points, and even the placement of surveillance cameras. Armed with improvised weapons and traps, Jack transformed the warehouse into his battleground. He started by disabling the exterior lights, plunging the compound into darkness. Using a slingshot, he launched small noise-generating devices to create distractions in multiple areas. As guards moved to investigate, Jack struck from the shadows, taking them down one by one with precision. Each move was silent, calculated, and efficient. The chaos he orchestrated was unnerving, and the gang's confidence began to crumble. Inside the warehouse, Jack found the cache of weapons: assault rifles, explosives, and ammunition. He planted charges on the crates, ensuring that the gang's arsenal would never see the light of day. The timer on the explosives ticked down as Jack continued his assault. Victor Kane, alerted to the commotion, rallied his remaining men. His voice echoed through the warehouse. "Whoever you are, you've made a big mistake. Come out now, and maybe I'll let you live." Jack stepped into the light, his face shadowed but his presence commanding. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he said, his voice calm yet menacing. Kane's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" Jack smirked. "Just a delivery guy." The fight between Jack and Kane was brutal. Kane was no stranger to violence, but he was no match for Jack's training and experience. Jack anticipated every move, countering with devastating precision. Their battle raged through the warehouse, ending with Kane lying unconscious amid the rubble. As the remaining gang members fled, the explosives detonated, reducing the cache of weapons to smoldering ruins. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance as the police, tipped off anonymously, closed in on the scene. Jack disappeared into the night, his mission complete. He returned to his apartment, battered but victorious, knowing he had delivered justice to those who thought they were untouchable. The morning after the raid, the town buzzed with rumors. Everyone was talking about the mysterious destruction of the gang's warehouse. The police confirmed a major weapons cache had been neutralized and several gang members arrested, but no one seemed to know who had orchestrated it all. Jack stood at the counter of Mia's cafe, sipping his coffee as the news played on the television mounted in the corner. Patrons whispered excitedly around him, their theories ranging from vigilantes to rival gangs. Mia approached, her usual cheerful demeanor tempered with a hint of curiosity. "Seems like someone scared those guys straight," she said, sliding a fresh muffin onto his plate. "Think it's over?" Jack shrugged, keeping his expression neutral. "Hard to say, but I think the town can rest easier for now." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, a flicker of suspicion behind her smile. You were always a little too clumsy to get into trouble like that, but sometimes I wonder. Jack met her gaze, the corner of his mouth tugging into a faint smile. I'm just a delivery guy, Mia. Uh-huh, she said, her tone teasing but knowing. Well, if you ever need backup on your routes, you know where to find me. Jack chuckled and took a bite of his muffin. The warmth of the cafe and the chatter of the other patrons felt comforting and grounding. It was the life he wanted, simple and quiet. But as he walked out to his van, now repaired and gleaming under the morning sun, Jack couldn't shake the lingering thought that his peace might not last. The fight with Kane's gang had stirred something inside him, a reminder of the man he used to be. He glanced down at his hands, calloused and steady, and sighed. For now, the town was safe. That was enough. As he climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, a folded piece of paper caught his eye on the dashboard. Opening it, he found a hastily scrawled note. Thanks for the cleanup. Delivery guy. See you around. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He crumpled the note in his fist, his jaw tightening. Kane might have been taken down, but the game wasn't over yet. Adjusting the mirror, Jack looked at his reflection. The clumsy delivery guy was gone, replaced by the quiet resolve of a man ready for whatever came next. He put the van in gear and drove off, the weight of his past and the promise of his future sitting side by side.